Hey everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have the third and final part of my October wrap-up. The first book is Pages & Co, Tilly and the Book Wanderers by Anna James. This is the first book in a series. It's doing the rounds on YouTube, Booktube at the moment, and it's a children's book that follows the adventures of Tilly, who lives in a bookshop with her grandparents, and she discovers that she has the ability to wander into books, which means she can meet all these different characters, go into all these different worlds and find an underlibrary where librarians are. Now, I shall say that I read this book simply because I've known that this book was coming out for a while and it sounded quite similar to my children's book that I'm currently writing and have been writing since 2013, and I felt this great wave of worry upon me. I was sending messages to my friends because I was that worried about it. So me and my friend Lily, Buddy, read this book, and I'm quite fortunate because whilst there are similarities, it's nothing like my children's book. And so the worry was assuaged, I went on writing, and really I should tell you what I think of this book. I think that this book is quite good. I want to read the series more because I feel like we only really got the character of Tilly developed here, and I'd like to see how all the other characters are developed as the series goes on. But I think as an adventure book, and it did quite well. It showed children interacting with literature in a great way. It had some great characters, and it was just nice to read this magical, cosy book. And it is one that I definitely recommend to my cousin's daughter. I mention that because the next book on this list is Love, Sugar Magic, A Dash of Trouble by Anna Meriano. And this is another book that whilst I like, I think that I will be giving to my cousin's daughter, or finding her a copy. I saw this book over on Richard Denny's channel, and if you know anything about me, you'll know that whilst I don't like horror at Halloween, what I do like are those weird, campy Disney Channel style ones that are more geared towards children. And I thought I need to purchase that book, so I got it. It's about this girl called Leo who discovers that she comes from a family of Brujas, and chaos ensues when she decides to pursue magic that she's not supposed to pursue for another 4 years. She feels like she's constantly in the shadow of her older sisters, and as the youngest is never able to get what she feels she always feels a bit left out. Cheesy, it's sweet. I mean, like, sometimes it was getting towards the too twee, but I understood it for the age group it was aimed towards. Really get enjoyment out of it. It's not a bad book. I think that as a children's book it's quite good, and I think that as a series it's going to do really well for itself, especially discussing a part of the culture, a part of the world's culture that isn't popularised that much in fiction or media. Next, I read Dying in Other Words by Maggie. This is an experimental novel that follows the death of Mo, a young woman living in this house who falls from a balcony, and then it goes into the lives of every single person who lived there. But also there's the strange tapping from a typewriter upstairs, which is supposedly Mo rewriting the story of these other characters. Whilst it isn't necessarily a murder mystery, being more experimental, it's one of those great things where it almost seems like the writer is writing in verse. I've always been fond of experimental novels, as I've said much and more in the past. I'm also really fond of seeing writers experiment with words and wordplay and all that fun stuff. So I really enjoyed this book for the first 200 pages. After that we get a section called The Papers, which included poetry and then included this weird dystopian look at the world, which I didn't quite understand why it was there, and I didn't get it. What I enjoyed from the book was the experimentation and the way that the writer seemed to be just saying a huge fuck you to the publishing world, and I thought that that was fantastic. This book came out in 1981, and I was thinking, yeah, this is breaking trends at the time. But then I was conflicted because I didn't understand why the last 30 or so pages were included in there. And I thought, well, is it for me to know? Is it for me to question? Were these the papers that Mo had in fact written herself, and this is just to give some idea of her world? Are the first 200 pages her story? And it brought all these questions to the forefront of my mind, which made me want to reread the book, so I will be keeping it. But I think that I need to go and discuss this with my friend Abercrombie, who gave me the book in the first place. This book has a lot in here that I really like. I read it really quickly because I was just enthralled. It was making me laugh. It was energetic prose that you don't see too often. It reminded me sometimes of Ali Smith and Virginia Woolf, as though, you know, like it's before Ali Smith, really. Is it good if I enjoyed it? I don't know. I'm so conflicted about this book because there's so much that I liked, but there's so much that I didn't understand. We are at the book that made me fail Victober. I had planned to read this book and a whole host of other Victorian novels, but this book just stopped me. And that book is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I believe that this is Katie's second favourite Dickens novel, and as I read Our Mutual Friend last year and thoroughly enjoyed that one, I thought, well, I'll take her recommendation and read this one. This is the story of Paul Dombey, who has a son and completely ignores his daughter. And from then on, you get the entire drama of their lives, because Florence is this brilliant, loving girl whose father is always constantly trying to stop her from achieving any form of love. And his only focus is on his son, and making sure that his son can be the perfect partner in his firm. I am sad to say that this is the first Charles Dickens book that has bored me. Whilst Nicholas Nickleby took me 2 years to read, that was more to do with me thinking that it was some high form of literature. I have since changed my opinion of Charles Dickens and found it much easier to get through his work. Yes, there have been times where I've only listened to the audiobook, but that's because I think sometimes Dickens works best being read to you, and indeed I did switch to the audiobook at points within this book, but that was more because I was completely bored. I'd set myself this task of reading 33 pages a day, because this edition is 1023 pages. And it started out okay, I was enjoying it, and I enjoyed it for quite a while, and then they just reached this point where I was thinking, I cannot cope with this book anymore. I am just fed up with these characters. And it was a shame, because this was one of the first Dickens novels where I was seeing female characters brought to the forefront, and they weren't these weak characters. They had their own minds and their own wants and desires, and it was just that this one man, well, two men in the end, were stopping them. And there's a lot of great Dickens characters in here, a lot of things you'd expect to see in fiction from Dickens. You had the last minute revelations and twists that are common in all of Dickens' books. It was a typical Dickens novel, and it was written in exactly the same style that I'm accustomed to, and yet I just did not gel with this book. And then finally, the last book that we read in October, we read for Halloween, and that was The Corset by Laura Purcell. This is her second book and follows two characters. You have the character of Ruth, who has been sent to this prison waiting trial for murder, and this charitable young woman named Dorothea, who goes to question her about just how she came to be in this prison. Ruth believes that she is able to sew her feelings into the clothes she makes, and that is how she has revenged herself upon the people that have wronged her throughout her life. Great, fine, dandy, brilliant. And Dorothea is really interested in phrenology. Once again, this is an incredibly fast book to read. I read it over 2 nights because, you know, Halloween, and I'd really enjoyed The Silent Companions when I read that earlier this year. When I heard the blurb for this, I worried it was going to be too similar. And I think that I was right in thinking that it was too similar. Not in terms of plot or anything, it just seemed as though Laura Purcell was repeating herself. And it reached this point where it felt very sensational. I don't know whether the writer was trying to capture that sensationalist thing of the literature in the past. The issue was great, but the ending as well. The way this book ended was too similar to The Silent Companions. Only in The Silent Companions I could almost cope with it, but in this book it was what my mother has always called a pill of an ending. And I put the book down and I just thought, no, the ending of this book ruined the entirety of the rest of the book for me. Whilst I know that that is probably incredibly historically accurate for the time, whilst I think that it was accurate for the way that this book was going, I just thought it was too much. It was too much tragedy for me, and there was too much acceptance of a tragic event that I just could not bear, and the book ended up not being for me. And them's the books. If you've read any of these books and would like to discuss them, please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.